Welcome to our September CJCC meeting. I know that there's at least one of our members who is stuck in traffic and will be here a little bit later. But with that said, we do have a quorum. I'm going to dispense with calling the roll because we know who's here, we know who's not. So with that said, the minutes from our July meeting were included in your materials. Are there any additions or corrections or deletions to those minutes? Hearing none, they'll stand approved as submitted. Public comment. I know that there is one person who has requested an opportunity to provide public comment. Yvonne Larson would like to address this body.
Good morning. An awesome event occurred in St. Croix County last week. The annual Shop with a Cop program, started by the Sheriff's Department, held their annual event at the Public Services Committee building in New Richmond. We had 100 registered students throughout the county that came to get new clothes and shoes for school. The event was scheduled to start at 4:30. At 4 o'clock, we had a lineup. My favorite person was a father who was obviously somewhat challenged, and he was there with 2 little girls. I cannot tell you how appreciative he was that we provided that for him. Officers in uniform from all the police departments in the county, and Mark, if you would thank them all, and deputies from the St. Croix County Sheriff's Department came in uniform and volunteered their time for that evening as they took all those kids one by one over to Walmart. The parents had prepared a list in advance of what each child needed, and so the kids would come running back with these bags to show everybody. And I know, and I apologize for my voice, I know a lot of you in this room deal with huge issues in this building every day, including putting kids into safe foster care homes, which is near and dear to my heart. I watched some of those families at this event, and those mothers were the ones that were there with cameras taking pictures of those foster kids with law enforcement. It meant so much to them. One of my favorite parts is when Mr. Roberts comes out of the building and he and I walk through the event, and we look at the parents over here having hot dogs, or their kids are off with the police for a positive experience with them, and there are games and there's food, and Mr. Roberts smiles, and I think within that smile there's a little bit of pride that all of this is happening in your parking lot. So I am guessing, venture to guess, that every member here in CJCC plays a part in benefiting the kids of St. Croix County, and for that I thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne, and certainly appreciation to the Sheriff's Department and our local law enforcement agencies for promoting that very positive impact on kids and those who are less advantaged, I should say. And it, again, are those little events that really make a difference and unfortunately don't catch as much press as some of the other things that are more, I guess, noteworthy relative to the darker side of what we do in the justice system. Any other public comments? Going twice. No additional public comment. Business items. The agenda is going to be a little bit different, folks. You can scratch item 8, presentation on the Huber program. That hopefully will be something that we will have maybe in November, but I'm taking that off the agenda for today. I'm certainly pleased, as always, to introduce my colleague, Judge Waterman. As you know, Judge Waterman served on the treatment court and served as presiding judge of treatment court for a number of years, replacing Judge Black. And I've asked him to recognize a member of that particular team who has been with that team since its inception. We are now in our 3rd presiding judge, but this individual has been with that program since it started and recently received recognition at the state level for her efforts in the treatment court world, and so I've asked Judge Waterman to recognize this individual.
Good morning, everyone. The Wisconsin Association of Treatment Court Professionals represents the interests of treatment court professionals across the state. Each year, the WATCP presents the Jack Alec Award. It recognizes an individual who has made outstanding contributions to the advancement of problem-solving courts across the state. I kind of think of it as the Hall of Fame of treatment courts. But there are a lot of distinguished and notable professionals who have received that award, most of whom were all judges. At the annual conference in April, the Pollock Award was presented to Liesl Nelson, our own Liesl Nelson. She is the first public defender to be recognized. It was awarded to Liesl in recognition of her extraordinary leadership in establishing the WATCP. She was one of the original founding members of that board, I understand, and also her promotion of the effectiveness of problem-solving courts statewide. And today, nearly every county in the state has at least one treatment court. Liesl remains a valued member of our own St. Croix County Treatment Court program. She was a founding member there, too. Having served on the court for 5 years, I can personally attest to the depth of Liesl's knowledge and the strength of her commitment. Our treatment court thrives on teamwork, where every member of the team makes a valuable contribution. But I have to confess, it really helps when you have a Hall of Famer on your team. So please join me in recognizing Liesl Nelson, the 2022 Jack Alec Award winner.
Thank you, Judge Waterman, and thank you, Judge Needham, too, for your kind words. It's really nice to be back here and see so many familiar faces. It's been a while since I've been in this room. I know that a lot of you already know a lot about our treatment court because you participated in it in various ways. I do want to, since sometimes we do hear a little bit too much about the dark side, take just a couple of minutes to just hit a couple of highlights about the light side of what's going on in treatment court in St. Croix County. The first I would say is that everybody here probably knows how passionate I am about treatment courts and how much I like to talk about them. And I think it's remarkable that not only the amount of tenure that I've had here probably speaks to what I feel about our treatment court, and the amount of time and energy that I've put in at the state level as well to develop treatment courts in Wisconsin. What you may not know is that St. Croix County continues its dedication to treatment courts at the statewide level. The current president of WATCP is our former coordinator, Kim Kitzberger, and also Judge Waterman serves on the board of WATCP. So we have a very strong history at this point of support and leadership at the state level in terms of developing our state treatment courts, supporting other courts. I think we've gained a bit of a reputation in terms of our ability to develop draft policies, share them with other counties that may be a little bit further behind in the development of their courts. And so we have a lot to be proud of on the state level in terms of how our court functions. I would also note that I think we are a little bit unique in that we have 3 judges right now that are all experienced, trained at the national and the state level. We have a pretty deep bench when it comes to professionals in this county that are trained to do this work. This work is so incredibly important. I think the CJCC is a great place to recognize that the treatment court is one of the places that we bring together every stakeholder in our criminal justice system. And we work in a room where we work together, we push each other to do better, to use evidence-based solutions, cost-effective solutions, but also solutions that help members of our community that have been struggling rebuild their lives, get better, do better. We do some really important things in that room. And from that perspective, I would just say, for anybody in this room who has never seen a treatment court session, who has never seen a treatment court graduation, I would strongly recommend that you find time in your calendar to do that. Every Wednesday, 8:30 in the morning, you can come down to Judge Nordstrand's court and see how the staffings work. If you really want to see what recovery looks like in your community, come to a graduation. Graduation is the place that you're going to see the folks in your community, where they started, what their journey looked like, and where they are at the end of it. And if you haven't seen one, I really think that you should. And thank you to everyone in this room for your continued support of our treatment courts. It takes a village, and this is the village. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Judge Waterman, and certainly congratulations to Liesl. I will attest to her passion, both for treatment court, but as an attorney. When she used to practice more regularly here in St. Croix, Liesl primarily now works in Pierce County as a public defender. She's also, I think, on that treatment court team in Pierce, so she does double duty. And we really value, as I said, not only her longevity, but also all of her experience and, as she said, the passion she brings to that program. Next, I've asked our County Administrator, Ken Witt, to just kind of get a brief update, overview. I think, as hopefully all of you know, this past early spring, the County Board approved a rather substantial bond to add on to this building and to renovate other portions of the building. It's been a process, again, that the courts have been intimately involved with, because the plan does provide for basically renovating this entire floor to be duplicate of the second floor, in essence 8 courtrooms total. So I thought it would be a good thing for this body to hear where we're at and where we're going, and so I've asked Mr. Witt to just give us kind of an update.
Thank you, Your Honor. The project is a 3-year project, and we're in the first year of it. Right now, what we're doing is the design phase of it. It's going to be bid in 2 packages. The first package will go out in 2 months, and that'll be the core and shell. So basically, where the exterior walls are for the addition part of the building, and all of the support columns within there. So you kind of have to have a rough idea of how the inside's going to lay out for that, but not finalized down to every last wall. So that's the first package that's going out shortly. And then in February will be the second bid package, and that'll be the final design. That's where they come in and they build all the walls, they put up the drywall, we know where all the doors are going to be. And so that'll be the second part of that. So from the first bid package, a couple months from now, they could potentially start this fall or December timeframe with digging in the ground. The wall panels will be here in the spring, so they'll be tipping up those giant concrete panels. And then as soon as that is encased, they'll start the interior build of the addition. Once the interior build of the addition is done, right around probably January, February of 2024. All of the offices that are currently here will move out, and then they'll come in and they'll start the remodel part of that. So all of 24 into the early part of 2025 will be the remodeling. So right now we're sitting in what will be courtroom, I think, 6. And Christy, I think, will get my office across the hall. So all of those plans are kind of laid out right now, but that's where we're at, is finalizing that design and gearing up for the construction part of it.
Questions of the administrator. As you note, there's some construction going on the north end. That's a warm storage facility, primarily to be used by the Sheriff's Department and facilities. For those of us that are sensitive to sound, the beep, beep, beeping continually throughout the day as these lifts go up and down has become part of, I hear it at night when I'm going to bed. And then the other thing about this building is that when there's any construction being done, we either feel it or hear it throughout the building. So they've been doing some excavation on the north end, and literally the whole building shakes. I'm not worried, but that's just one of those things that a construction project brings with it. So we're really looking forward to this coming to completion. There will be, as Mr. Witt said, there will be an addition on the north end, and then a major addition on the south end, where primarily all the administrative offices are going, and the building that we've known as the Government Center will become pretty much the entire justice portion of the building, with the clerk of courts, DA, and 8 courtrooms, family court commissioner and court commissioner. So we're partnering with the county, the courts are, to make sure that the designs, et cetera, meet our standards and meet the approval of the chief judge. And so we are continuing that process. So any questions? Treatment court update. Judge Nordstrand is, as we speak, probably still in bed in Hawaii, so I won't disturb him with a Zoom call to give us the update. So Kate is going to tell us what's happening in treatment court.
So last meeting we talked about, we have 2 tracks in treatment court. Our track 2 was our OWI court, but due to the statute changes, we have decided to merge the 2 of them for right now, just because our track 2 will be diminishing off. That doesn't mean that we're technically getting rid of a court. Right now, our grant, we can have 20 to 25 people. That's a full court. We are at 21 with still a list of referrals to come in. So our 2 tracks are together for 25. So we will just have a bigger track 1. Right now, we'll still take OWI cases. They'll just be smaller and on a case-by-case basis for right now. I just want to tell you, too, that we don't just take OWI cases and drug cases. Some of our cases right now, one is a theft. They just have to have a huge drug component or alcohol component to be able to come into our program. So that's what we're doing right now with those. And then we have had 2 graduations since our last meeting, so that's great. And a few that will be coming up in the next 2 months. So I or Phil will send out invites to the whole CJCC. They would love to come. Also, please, again, on Wednesdays, our participants do look in the pews and see who's there. They love to see new faces and our community members.
Thank you. Questions of Kate? And I will commend Kate and her staff and Judge Nordstrand. There were several graduations that occurred during COVID, and because of that, they were done remotely, so those folks didn't get kind of the public recognition that graduates in a non-COVID world have received. So 2 months ago, Kate?
Yes.
2 months ago, they brought in all the COVID graduates from the last 2 years and recognized them and gave them kind of their time in the spotlight, so to speak. And I was able to go to at least a portion of that, and so I thought that was just a really significant thing to do with those people who had graduated and came back with their families and others to have that public recognition. Also, as Kate said, Track 2, which is the OWI track, is kind of phasing out, and Judge Nordstrand had, I think, talked about that last month, and it's primarily because of changes in the law. 5th and 6th offense OWIs traditionally would have gone into our Track 2 treatment court, but with the legislative changes that now make 5th and 6th offenses mandatory prison, we've taken away that population of folks who otherwise, in the majority of cases, probably would have been in our treatment court program. So I think they're trying to target 4th offense, which is also now a felony, but it's really narrowed the numbers that we were trying to accommodate and target for treatment court in that particular track. Questions of Kate about treatment court? You're a quiet group today. TAD grant update, Phil.
Sure, thank you, Judge. So TAD grant writing season is upon us. As I had mentioned back in July, they've added a bit of a fold this year as a pre-application that was due in mid-August. So Lisa, Kate, and I worked on that, and we got our pre-application to the Department of Justice. It was, I think, more of a formality is kind of how I viewed it. That's maybe a bit rough, but we'll be moving forward here in the next couple weeks as that application becomes available at the end of September. It'll be due November 1st. Those are tentative dates. I think the one kind of change This is a non-competitive TAD year for us, but there's additional resources available, and we're going to take advantage of that. And we're going to be asking for roughly $30,000 to support a part-time case manager that would be split between diversion and treatment court to provide mostly data entry services. So we're hopeful. I think the state has an additional $2 to $3 million that is going to be, that part will be competitive amongst the 50 or so counties in the state that have TAD. So there is some competition for that money. But we'll know more on that by the end of the year. So we'll be able to provide an update in November after we get that submitted.
Lisa, Kate, anything you want to add?
No, great job, Bill.
Any questions of Phil or Lisa, Kate about TAD grant? Justice Support Services update. Phil, it's your show.
Thank you. So first, we have two things here, really. I mean, a couple things, but we have a new pretrial case manager, Kayla, if you just want to give us a wave. Kayla started last Wednesday. She joins us from Goodhue County, worked in court operations, so we are at full staff in pretrial. The other kind of major thing that's going on is we will be beginning Mrt Facilitation on Wednesday, October 5th. So we have secured a space in New Richmond at the Services Center. So on Wednesdays, starting in October, at least through the end of the year, we'll be using that space from 5:30 to 7. So we'll be accepting referrals. We're still working on some forms that Lisa had given us. Still finalizing our contract with DOC, but that process is up and going. So Tina and Kelly will be our facilitators with the hope and expectation that by the first of the year, we'll actually have a second group going, getting a couple other staff trained. So MRT will be back in person. So I'll get some more information out to Public Defender's Office, to the DA's office, about what that looks like.
I'll put Tina on the spot. For those not familiar with the acronym, just explain briefly what MRT is.
MRT stands for Moral Recognition Therapy, so it helps with the criminal thinking and the justification of criminal behavior, as well as just a lot of people in the justice system that have that criminal thinking put the blame and they play the victim card, so it helps make them realize that they're not always the victim and that their actions do affect other people and how to change that thinking.
And I think MRT's been around for a while in St. Croix. Lisa and a few others were trained how many years ago?
The diversion program facilitated MRT for 7 years.
And then there was a transfer to DHS, and now we're taking it back in-house through Justice Services. But it's a valuable program, and one I know that DOC uses, and with the gap, I think they've been using telehealth, which I won't make any editorial comments about trying to provide therapy through a Zoom, but I think certainly in-person, person-to-person is, in my opinion, valuable. So I appreciate Phil taking that on and capturing it and getting it back up and going, and Tina and Kelly for their training and starting it up on October 5th. Lisa.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Phil and Tina and Kelly, because it is a very valuable program. After facilitating it for the extended amount of time that we did, we saw many successful cases. We worked really well with DOC on it, and I'm very happy to see that Bill took the lead in being able to keep that within the county. So thank you guys very much, because it is a great program.
Any questions, Phil, about Justice Services or MRT? Agnes.
So is it voluntary? Is it required? Is it, how does it, who
That's a-
shows up and how do they get there?
Sure, great question. So the majority of our referrals will come from Department of Corrections, that will have a contract with them, from treatment court as well as from diversion. I will have to defer to Lisa or anyone else. Can people participate voluntarily?
We did not take people voluntarily because they have to have that specific criminogenic need, which is going to be like that criminal personality, criminal thinking. We generally wouldn't have people that are low risk in MRT. They need to be medium or high risk offenders. So people that are going to be more challenging to work with. It's a very intensive program. I think Tina and Kelly are going to do an amazing job with that. They both have the experience and the training for it. And so we utilize the COMPASS assessment to determine if someone is appropriate for that program. At times it is court ordered. So those individuals would have had a COMPASS, and it would be known that they're appropriate for it, if that makes sense.
So the majority of times, it'll be a condition of probation that the judges will order some cognitive-based programming. MRT is the specific program, but there are other situations certainly where DOC has someone that they're supervising and they've done their own assessments and have concluded that this will be a good program for this particular person. So it's generally a referral process. Other questions? Phil's also going to talk about a partnership, again, that he's kind of spearheaded with UW-Madison. Phil.
Sure, thank you again. So back at the end of July, Supervisor Fiedler sent me an opportunity to partner with, it's called University Year, so it's run through UW-Madison. What it is townships, municipalities, counties come to this organization that's housed at UW-Madison with projects that they're interested in. And the idea is to pair the county then with a faculty member and typically graduate students at UW-Madison. So with some suggestions from the Justice Services folks, we identified a couple projects that we're interested in for us, but I think that really fit with this body as well. The first one is helping place individuals in residential treatment for inpatient drug and alcohol use. And really just developing partnerships. So that is one. And then the second one is sober living facilities in St. Croix County for women and children. So I put together a brief application. Judge Nordstrand wrote a letter of recommendation, and we sent it off. And we have been paired with the public health department at Madison. They have a graduate, it's a master's program. So we'll be working with them this fall. It's a 2 to 3 year project, really. So it'll start this fall, and the beginning stages are going to be really planning. The grad students will do literature reviews, see kind of what's been done, what's available, what partnerships would be available for us, and then from there, you know, it's kind of a blank canvas, I guess, but to have that support of another institution, of a faculty member who I think a lot of her research is in these kind of areas, and then with, you know, having graduate students help kind of do some research for us, hopefully we'll be able to identify more resources maybe that are here in the county that we haven't tapped into, but other things, ways that we can expand some of the network. So that's something that will be kind of ongoing. I just had a meeting on Tuesday afternoon, kind of introductory meeting, so I'll meet with the students next week, kind of introductory with the grad students, and I'll be able to provide more in November about what that project looks like.
I think, as you remember, I think last meeting we heard from the director of the sober living facilities, I think in Richmond and Somerset, and she explained the challenge of establishing sober living facilities for women, and especially women with children. So this appears to be a great partnering that we can maybe at least look at that void and, while not necessarily fill it, at least start to address it as something that St. Croix County can offer. So questions of Phil about that partnership? I also asked Bob Rarrett to talk to us about the healthcare wing and withdrawal management proposal plan that his department had been working on. I think we were all hopeful that maybe there would be really exciting news today, but Apparently there's been a little hiccup, and so I'll ask him to at least present, and I think certainly situational awareness and our support maybe will be of assistance getting through the hiccup. So Bob.
Thank you, Judge. It's about a $2 million hiccup. Yes, thank you. And when Phil asked me to present on this topic, we were still awaiting the award announcement from DHS around this project. And we found out late last week that we were not awarded the grant funding, which was surprising to us. But we did put forward a very good proposal, I think, and that proposal is available if anyone would like to see it. It provides more detail about what we were intending to do. What I thought I would do today is just provide you with a very brief sort of overview of what withdrawal management is, and then what the project was that we were trying to accomplish through not just HHS, but through our partnership with Western Wisconsin Health. Ailey Peterson's been very helpful with the sheriff, local law enforcement, recovery housing, et cetera. So there were a lot of partners that were trying to help us move this forward. And we'll continue to make efforts to put together a program similar to this. We just don't have the money right now, so that's unfortunate, but here we go. So withdrawal management's a term that's, sometimes people ask, how is that different than social detox or detoxification services? And the way it's different is that this is a integrated service area that's defined by ASAM, or the American Society of Addiction Medicine criteria. It's a defined service area that involves an integrated model with medical professionals and behavioral health professionals in a residential setting, typically, where people are treated for their withdrawal symptoms from any drug, including alcohol, and they're treated for any other physical health or mental health conditions that they might have, co-occurring conditions. Typically, again, these are provided in a residential setting for a short period of time, typically anywhere from 2 to 5 days, to stabilize the person, treat their withdrawal symptoms, treat their intoxication syndrome symptoms, and then connect them to ongoing care in the community through things like peer support, case management, connections to housing, connections to employment, et cetera. So the idea behind all of this is to look at addiction through the lens of chronic disease management. And typically what we see in communities is that we treat addiction independent of other healthcare kinds of services. So we treat it differently, more as a crisis service and more as a detoxification than you're out the door kind of thing. That's not to diminish any care that people provide. It's just saying that we don't have a coherent system of treating people with severe addiction that allows them to have the support they need going forward. These kinds of services keep that in the forefront of our thinking, where we develop recovery plans almost from the moment of admission to a place like this, and then follow up with those recovery plans and develop them with the person long after they've left the facility. Again, this is defined better in the American Society of Addiction Medicine criteria. That's continually being updated. It's a science-based way of trying to quantify matching the severity of the illness with the level of care that's most appropriate. That's what ASAM essentially tries to do. It's an assessment tool, a multi-dimensional assessment tool. What withdrawal management services in a community-based setting would offer is a community-based option other than a hospital emergency department or jail, where a person can get this kind of help. A person with severe addiction can get this kind of help to medically withdraw from whatever drug they're on and to get those connections I spoke about. It's typically about roughly a third the cost of an emergency department encounter, and it's certainly safer and less expensive than placing someone in jail or transporting them long distances to a hospital or inpatient unit somewhere else, which was the attractive piece of this to law enforcement. Was not just getting the people the help they need, but it was having a local option where you could take people to drop them off and have medical professionals and behavioral health professionals treat them. Law enforcement can go on their way, and the person is getting the kind of care that they would actually need for this kind of severe illness. Just quickly, there's relatively a small percentage of people in the county that require this kind of care, but that relatively small percentage of people cost the most to treat. And oftentimes they're undertreated or not treated at all, in which case they end up cycling through courts and jails and hospital emergency departments. They cost taxpayers, they cost all of us a lot of money, and they don't get well. So the idea behind this was to better treat that small segment of the population that needs this care, give them better care, and prevent them from cycling through these expensive emergency kinds of services or jails. And jails have essentially become de facto mental health institutions and detoxification centers. I kind of went over this, but the project that we were proposing did involve 24-hour-a-day care, 365 days a week, or days a year. And again, it would have been an option for law enforcement to drop someone off, and a diversion from jail for those people that are not violent and that are medically stable enough that they don't need to go to an emergency department. And the service is very cost-effective as compared to emergency departments. We operated these in the Twin Cities. I was the director of one and a consultant and contract manager for another one in Hennepin County. We saw the benefits to law enforcement, to healthcare, and to the individuals, of course, almost immediately when these were operated properly. So there are really no regional options for this type of care in St. Croix County. Law enforcement has to transport people great distances if there's a bed somewhere, or these folks end up in emergency departments or jail. It's very dangerous to withdraw from alcohol if you're physically dependent on it. The withdrawal symptoms can be life-threatening. Not so much for opioids. In fact, their opioid withdrawal is not life-threatening in itself, but alcohol withdrawal can be. So it's a very dangerous thing to not treat someone if they're severely addicted and withdrawing from alcohol. So we don't have these kinds of options available locally currently. So what we proposed doing was to open a medically monitored withdrawal management center at the healthcare campus using the Kitty Rhodes facility, which isn't currently being utilized. It's ideally set up for that kind of a service area. There's 10 beds. We could add beds to some of those rooms to make it 16 beds. Again, the facility was designed for people with dementia and other kinds of complicating behavioral conditions. So it's already designed perfectly for this kind of service. We were asking for $2 million from the state to fund this, and contracting with a provider I'd worked with out of the Twin Cities who would have come in and operated the facility. A medical doctor, addiction doctor, with an X waiver to prescribe Suboxone. That wouldn't have covered the costs of medical professionals and behavioral health professionals, but we were planning to bill for crisis services, and we were planning to contract with neighboring counties to utilize that space and make up the additional revenue that way, which I think we could have done. We currently have $150,000 that the county board allocated to us through ARPA funding that can be used towards withdrawal management services. It's at the time when we applied for that money, we didn't really have an idea of how to use it, so we didn't know how much to ask for because we didn't know exactly what we would do. I did put together a concept paper about a year ago on how to use that $150,000 to do something locally. Again, it would be a very, very scaled down version of what we had proposed in this RFP. But we have that money, so we're not giving up, and we're help from Phil and from others, we're looking at other grant opportunities that might allow us to still move forward with this. We have a good proposal. It's already written. We can hand it out. We had proposed to work with Kaishin Clinic. It's the clinic I talked about that Dr. Sasaki is the medical director of. They could have stepped in and started services immediately. Again, just Western Wisconsin Health, Ailey and Dr. Anwar were very helpful in trying to coordinate care with us so that if people came to this center, this withdrawal management center, but required a higher level of care, we would have transported them to Western Wisconsin Health for emergency care, stabilized them medically, and then they could have transferred back to the withdrawal management center or been discharged from the hospital with ongoing support. And the sheriff, Chief Young from River Falls, and all local law enforcement expressed a desire to move forward with this kind of project, saw the benefits of it. I know there were some legitimate concerns raised around how to coordinate law enforcement from different counties, maybe dropping people off, and whose responsibility is it once they're dropped off at the facility to respond to any kind of crisis needs. So there were some things we would have had to work through, but in general, I think law enforcement was very supportive of this idea. I think it would have benefited the jail as well by having people diverted to withdrawal management instead of spending time in jail and withdrawing there. And it had been a lot safer. So we were going to use the Kitty Roads facility. Let's see, since it's still available to us, but we have to find a way to operate that facility for its intended purpose or for some other purpose. We can't just leave it sit empty indefinitely. So the problem there has been around workforce staffing, and that's why it's not being utilized right now. But we could have repurposed it for this reason and temporarily and then moved it back to its intended purpose after the grant had expired. So that's just a real quick overview. Again, I do have the proposal. It's available if you'd like to read it and get some better detail about what it was we were trying to do. The value is, as the judge said and as Phil said, is in raising awareness around how this kind of care could benefit county residents who need it and benefit law enforcement, the courts, and jail. That was the intention and why we put so much effort into trying to make this happen. So thank you to those who partnered with us and worked with us on it. Any questions around any of this?
And maybe not a question for you, Bob, but maybe for the sheriff or the chief. When you have somebody now you've arrested or in custody that's going through withdrawal, what do we do?
Well, a lot of times if we see that they're in withdrawal or they're in some form of a medical crisis, they have to be cleared before they go to the jail. So they'll go to the hospital, and then the hospital will, if they deem them to stay, that their medical overweighs. Again, we take into account criminal charges, public safety. You know, if it's something that we can give a notice to appear, we try to divert from the jail. If the hospital says, yeah, they can go to the jail, but extra monitoring, that's where some of those receiving cells that are usually full and some of these other special needs cells are used to monitor that. And again, we don't have 24/7 nursing coverage within the jail, and that causes some challenges at times for the on-duty staff, where you have jailers that are taking blood pressure and monitoring these things and calling the hospital for updates. It's a challenge. So this would have been another option for us.
And I'll just add to that. I think there's a lot of times where local law enforcement will take a person to the hospital to get medical clearance prior to going to the jail, and they may be at a 0.425 or higher, and the medical staff will say, yes, they're cleared to go to jail. Well, that's not when they're in the need. You know, they're probably on their way up, and typically when they get medically cleared, it's because at that moment they could go in, and then once they get into the jail and were turned over to the jail, that's when a lot of the problems happen because they then start to detox. They don't have access to anything to keep them at that level, and they start to tank at that point. I think this facility would have been perfect for, you go to do the medical clearance, you issue that NTA, but then you drop them off for that continual care to try to help with that. So yeah, there was a lot of support from the local law enforcement when we were hearing about this.
I'll add to that too, that when the patients come to us in the emergency department, we'll do everything that we can to stabilize the patient, but the emergency room department is not the best place for these particular patients to receive care. So this type of service would have been perfect for that. Oftentimes the patients don't necessarily require an inpatient stay. So they stay in the ER for longer periods of time than is necessary, which causes other challenges from a capacity standpoint. So this type of arrangement and service would have allowed for the right care at the right time, at the right place. Bob also mentioned the cost portion. Oftentimes these individuals don't have insurance, and so these are unfunded stays in emergency departments. Our proposal included a navigator who would, while the patient was in withdrawal management, assist the patient with obtaining insurance, which would have set them up for longer-term success and allowed them to be sustainable, as well as whatever additional services they received. So really important for us to continue to look at this option and this service. It's very much needed all the way around.
Judge.
Is the plan dead, or are there other funding options available?
There's no other funding at the moment other than the $150,000 that we have through ARPA. And that's available to us through the end of '24. But we're looking at other grant opportunities, Judge, through SAMHSA, through any place that might fund it. There was some hope that the state of Wisconsin is moving towards a crisis now model of care that involves these short-term stabilization services as a part of that model. And the hope is that they will be able to adjust their state plan in order to have Medicaid pay for this kind of service going forward. We'll see what happens in the legislative cycle, but that might be an option. And then the state court system is looking at ways in which to develop diversionary programs like this, although that's in the early stages of a steering committee effort. So we don't know if there's going to be any money coming through the state court system or some other combination of that and crisis now model. But that would be in the future, and I don't know how long, probably a year or two. The hope was to use this grant funding to get us through the next couple of years and then have a stable funding source after that through one of these other two efforts.
This is a little off topic, but certainly in the same vein. I know at one time there was some discussion at the state level about trying to regionalize mental health crisis as well, as opposed to Winnebago or whatever facility we're currently using. Would that be part of this kind of approach as well, Bob, to try to regionalize those emergency mental health situations as well?
Yes, Judge, it would be. There have been some RFPs that have come out for regions to apply for, but the dollar amounts were very thin, and it wouldn't have been we couldn't make it work when we looked at the figures. Again, going forward, yes, the WCA, the Wisconsin County Association, is making mental health a top priority on their legislative agenda. So the hope is that they will find some traction in a more stable or an adequate funding source to do regional, whether it's mental health or like this would have been a combination sort of addiction and mental health crisis care or stabilization for a period of 3 to 5 days roughly. It's still a priority for the state. I don't know that they've landed on any kind of strategic approach to how they want to roll this out. They're unclear about that.
At least in our world, I think that's an equally challenging concern and issue to transport folks who are already in crisis to Winnebago, which is a 5-hour drive, Sheriff, and at least for me in the last 2 months, I've had 3 juveniles who we've had to transfer to Winnebago, and now you've got family and parents. And so anyway, I raise that because this is critical, but I think at least from what we see on our end, the mental health crisis is even equal. Sheriff.
I was just going to say we had one in the jail the other night that we had to, on the arrest, attacked a deputy, kind of in crisis, deemed all right to go to the jail, and then just continued to go downhill, and we ended up taking them to Mendota the other night, or Winnebago the other night, so it's a challenge. And again, I can't speak for the body, Bob, but if having any type of support from this group, would be useful in either of these initiatives, don't hesitate to bring something forward if that might be of assistance.
I appreciate that. Thank
Any
you.
other questions of Bob or the sheriff or anyone else? Or yes.
If I may say too, Bob, every municipality would probably be right along with you as far as any support we can give you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we greatly appreciate Western Wisconsin Health's efforts on this, and they're partnering with the county. So likewise, if there's things that this group can do to support, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
CJCC Subcommittee aligning with County Strategic Plan. Sounds rather weighty. Phil.
Sure, thank you, Judge. So when I first started 3 or 4 months ago, Judge Needham and I talked a little about kind of the direction of CJCC moving forward, and I've proposed something that I actually borrowed from Bob Rarrett and Behavioral Health Subcommittee, but my thought right now is to get some input from you all about how we can align ourselves as a body with, and the subcommittees of the CJCC as supporting of the full body, with the county strategic plans, in particular goal number 1, which is community well-being. I have a couple thoughts of my own, but I want to hold off on those. And so something maybe I'll task everybody with, if you would, even just very informally over the next couple months before our November meeting, if you have thoughts on what that might look like, email me, call me, come see me. Feel free to speak up here. I think it should be something as we move into 2023 that could be measurable, something that that we can say at the end of 2023 or whatever our timeline is that yes, we achieved this, or yes, we're working towards this. But the idea is to maybe come up with a couple goals for the body, and then how can each of the subcommittees contribute and support that. Subcommittees, I know are doing some great work as well, but what can they do to support those maybe larger goals?
So if, maybe Phil, if you could send out both the county's mission statement as well as the strategic plan, and then I'll challenge everyone to come up with, an idea or more about how this group, can focus on the county's mission, the county's strategic plan, but in ways that are quantifiable, I guess. I think I mentioned a few months ago that we've kind of been at this 30,000 foot level now for a couple of years, and arguably, in my opinion, if we can start to drill down now and look at measurable, quantifiable, critical issues or areas that we can address. And all of you are here for a reason. You represent a particular constituency or a particular area of the justice system, so there are no bad ideas or things that you think of, especially our citizen members, who you're the pulse of St. Croix County in many respects. We operate kind of under our own dome here, but as community members, there may be things that you've said to yourself, why aren't we doing this? There are no bad ideas. So if there's something that you've thought about, or something when you get the strategic plan or the county's mission statement, you say, is this something that might be worthwhile? Throw it out there. We welcome that, and we welcome everyone's input, but especially, as I said, the citizen members who have kind of a different vantage as to, I think, the justice system and what all of us do. So any questions about the challenge? And I'll be checking to make sure you've been submitting your ideas, so just keep that in mind. I'm not reluctant to send reminders. We'll get into the subcommittee updates. Executive committee, there's really nothing to report. We meet frequently, primarily to look at upcoming agendas to look at what's happening in our subcommittees, review budget. So there's nothing critical that we're looking at as a group. Criminal justice, Judge Waterman.
We will be seeing what we can do to align our work with the county strategic plan. In addition, we've been also focused on trying to tailor justice services, delivery of services to the justice system's needs. And we're really getting down into the details, and I won't bore you with those, but it's things like, who do we test? How frequently do we test people for drugs and alcohol? What do we test for? What happens when somebody passes a test? What happens when somebody fails a test? What should the responses be? All of those details are being addressed and worked through. So we have a task force work group meeting on September 12 with the district attorney, public defender, justice services, Phil Golly, and myself. And then our subcommittee will meet on October 3 at noon.
Thank you. Any questions of Judge Waterman about criminal justice? Treatment court, Kate, anything other than what you've already shared?
Treatment court is just still working on updating our policies and procedures, and now that we're merging, that will shift some of our procedures and how we move forward.
Domestic violence, Judge Vlack is at a meeting this morning in Madison, so Phil, I think, is going to update on that.
Sure, I thought I saw Commissioner Heckman. I didn't know if he had anything he wanted to, oh, he left, okay. We have our next meeting, we're moving it. It was supposed to be next Wednesday, or 2 Wednesdays from now on September 21st, but we're going to push that into October. So October 26th at 11:30. The one thing we are working on is a resource guide that Commissioner Heckman has been working on for quite some time. So hopefully by our next meeting, we'll have those resource guides available to the public regarding domestic violence, interpersonal violence resources, family resources. So that's it.
Yes.
Just as a side note to that, the lethality assessment program, which we heard about several years ago from the Menominee chief, we put into play here in St. Croix County, North Hudson, and St. Croix County Sheriff started the program. We now have trained all but 3 agencies in St. Croix County. 1 will be trained next Monday, and so we're working towards a county-wide lethality assessment program for victims of domestic abuse. So we're getting closer.
And that's great news, Chief, because I can tell you, and I think Judge Waterman will share, when we see that in some of the reports, that assessment that's been done, it really helps me form, what should I do with the bond? What should I do with some of these other areas? So kudos to you and the sheriff and others who have helped roll this out, and getting everybody on board is certainly going to be useful. Agnes.
On the resource guide, I think it would be really important to work with 211. So I think we can all develop resource guides all over the place, but it's really important whatever you come up with is shared with them, or you're not recreating the wheel if they have it.
Thank you. Other questions about that? Bob, behavioral health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met on July 25th and talked about the National Judicial Task Force to examine state courts' response to mental illness. Again, that's the effort where Wisconsin sent a delegation to Vermont, was a part of that, and Chief Young from River Falls was a part of that. What Wisconsin is doing now is developing their own steering committee, the state court system, to look at the issue of mental health and addiction with respect to diversionary programs. There will be not a seminar, but a symposium or a gathering of some kind in Madison, probably after the first of the year. I think that's by invite only. The Chief Justice sort of determines the makeup of that, but I would certainly invite anyone interested or ask that they be invited to that summit. When I have more details, I'll pass that along. We also discussed the overview of Dhs Efforts, the Crisis Now model that I referenced. We talked about community-based withdrawal management because at the time we were hopeful that we would get that funding. And Char Lopez provided an update on the American Rescue Plan Act initiatives that we've started under that ARPA funding through HHS. Our next meeting is September 26th, later this month at 10:30 at the Services Center.
Thank you. Any questions of Bob about behavioral health? Phil, you have a pretrial work group?
That's what I...
Oh, okay, all right, that's the same thing. My notes. Heather, you going to report on the Juvenile Justice Child Protection Task Force?
Yes, so we created a task force work group to work on process and systems improvements between Children's Services, the District Attorney's Office, the court system. As you all know, there are a lot of children in out-of-home placements right now, and the placement availability throughout Wisconsin is limited, and so Children's Services is struggling with placing children, where to place them, high-needs kids, and just how those systems work with the court system and the District Attorney's Office. I believe we will be participating in the JET initiative, which is Judicial Engagement Team Initiative through the state that Judge Needham and Judge Waterman have looked into, and it sounds like all the stakeholders involved in this work group are willing to participate in that to help improve our systems in the children's and juvenile court world. We are not going to meet in October or November while we work with the JET initiative, and we'll probably have a meeting in December to see where things are at.
Thank you. Questions of Heather about the Juvenile Justice Child Protection Work Group? At the November meeting, I hopefully will have a report. I think hopefully everyone is aware of the tragedy that occurred a couple of months ago involving a retired judge who was killed by a former defendant whom he had sentenced. So the Chief Justice has formed a court security, judicial security task force, and I've been asked to serve on it. I think there's 6 judges from around the state who are going to be meeting in Madison in October to look at that entire area. We are blessed in St. Croix to have the security that we have relative to the building. It is certainly the exception around the state to have security, and so I'll bring at least what I can in terms of what we're doing here, but I think the bigger concern is outside of the building, what maybe can be done to enhance or try to protect judges, judicial officers, others involved in the court system. So our meeting is October 6th, and so I'll hopefully have a report out in November about things that are happening and initiatives that might be undertaken. So that's kind of the committee reports. Request for future agenda items. If you have things that, again, you believe would be something that we should put on the agenda, again, there are no bad ideas. Phil and I and the executive committee, generally try to come up with those things that we think might be of interest, but also those things that may require at least our attention. As I said, hopefully we'll have something at the November meeting on Huber and EHM and some of the initiatives that the sheriff is taking. But if you have other ideas, let us know. I'm aware of no announcements or correspondence. Our next meeting is November 10th in this room at 8 o'clock. And absent anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you. Great meeting.